Just as a general introduction, Maseches Sotah ends off with a discussion about Moshiach, because, like we said, we've been saying throughout this whole Masechta, the whole process of the Sotah is sort of symbolic of a time of gullus in general, right? When this woman is sort of estranged from her husband temporarily, and the ultimate goal is for her to come back. That's sort of telling us sort of what the whole purpose of gullus is, really, is that even when there's sort of this temporary distance or separation that we have from HaShem, the ultimate goal is to reach the times of Mashiach, which is how this Masechta concludes. There's many sort of characteristics or perspectives which the Torah tells us to have, which of course we only apply to ourselves and not to others. So there's this is one example of that, right? Where for yourself, of course, you should trust in Hashem and not be worried about where's my sustenance coming tomorrow. But of course, we shouldn't have that attitude towards other people. And there's this famous idea from the Kotzker Rebbe, where the Kotzker says, everything in the world comes from Torah, even atheism. So what's the source for atheism in the Torah? Is this idea of tzedakah, right? That when it comes to other people, we have to almost behave as if we're atheists, right? We have to, we can't say like, oh, Hashem will provide for them, right? Don't worry, you'll have your food tomorrow. Like, we have to take responsibility ourselves to ensure that people have what they need and not sort of just say we're relying on Hashem. But of course, when it comes to our own, for ourselves, then we can have that attitude. And actually, what's interesting is that the language here is specifically pas bistale, right? Someone, if you have bread in your basket now, then you shouldn't be worried about tomorrow, right? And the question is why? Why would it matter if I have it in my basket now, right? Like, either way, I should have trust in Hashem for tomorrow, right? So just two answers to that question. So the Ben Yehuda says that, if somebody's hungry now, like right now, I don't have what I need. It's almost like you can't blame him for sort of having this concern or this worry about the future. But if you're someone who has what you need now, then like there's no excuse to not have that type of faith. And another idea is that the Belzer Rebbe talks about this and says that the Gemara is specifically telling us when someone has pas b'sale, meaning even when you have what you need, right, you should still recognize that it's from Hashem, right? Don't feel confident and feel secure, like, oh, I already have what I need, I'm okay, but still realize that Hashem is the one who's giving whatever you have right now. It's also being given to you by Hashem. And there's this story in the Zohar where the Zohar describes how Rabbi Yossi Saba, he used to daven for, when he would sit down to have his meal and the food was right in front of him, he would still daven to Hashem that Hashem give him food, right? Even though it was right there. Because he had this realization that, of course, Hashem is, recreating the world at every moment. And, even what we already have is also being able to appreciate and recognize that that's a gift from Hashem. And of course, just to point out, this does not mean that a person shouldn't do their put an effort in order to, make a living and to sustain themselves. Of course, this is not negating someone putting in their own work in order to, do whatever, do whatever natural means it takes to take care of themselves. But the idea is to recognize that it's not your effort that's actually bringing the blessing. It's Hashem that's bringing that to you. And the Be'er Mayim Chaim gives the example of planting a seed in the ground, right? It's like you just have to plant one seed and then the earth sort of allows that seed to grow and develop into a whole plant. But it's obvious to you that I'm just planting that one little seed, but it's the earth that's sort of allowing that seed to grow into what it then develops into. So,
that's such a great mashal.
Yeah.
Very difficult idea. I think a lot of people struggle with,
Yeah, balancing that.
Yeah, balancing those two things. So, Rabbi Ella says, the reason why the chariot of fire passed them by without harming them, De'ika Dibor, is because they were speaking words of Torah. Halaka Dibor, which implies that if they weren't speaking words of Torah, they'd be fit to be burned. For Amar Ela Bar Bracha says, Shnei Talmidei Chachamim Hadaran B'Yirachas, there are two Torah scholars who dwell in the same city. The Ein Nechin Zel Zeh B'Halacha, and they don't they don't like kind of live peaceably together with regard to halacha. They don't learn from each other's halachic methods. One of them will die, and one of them will be exiled. A very harsh punishment. Shenemar, as it says, right? It says about the Ir Miklat that somebody who It's a place, Ir Mikveh is a place where a murderer can flee there, a murderer who has killed someone without knowing. The Ein Das, El Torah, Das always means Torah, Shenemar, Nidmu Ami, Mivli Hadas. My people are destroyed because of lack of knowledge, right? Pasuk from Moshiach, and their Das means Torah. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Brader Rabbi Chia, Rabbi Yehuda, the son of Rabbi Chia, said, "Kol Talmud Chacham Ha'asek B'Torah B'Techat Chak." Any Torah scholar who engages in Torah study, despite the pressure of poverty, Tefillah Nishmas, his prayers are certainly answered. Shenemar Ki Am B'Tzion Yeshiv Yerushalayim, B'Chalev Tivcha Chanech Chancha L'Kol Zakacha. Right? Kishmasai Anacha. Right? So it says, the people who dwells in Sion and Yerushalayim don't cry anymore. Like Hashem's certainly going to be gracious to you and answer your cry. When he hears you, as soon as he hears you, he's going to answer you. It says afterwards, it says Hashem's going to give you, a very small amount of bread and very little water, right? So this is indicating that this pasuk saying Hashem's going to answer you right away is talking about somebody who is poor and nevertheless remains devoted to a life of Torah. Aribahu says, not this Torah scholar who, learns despite being poor, not only has his prayers answered, but must be an also miziv hashchina, right? He is satiated with the glory of the Shechina, right? The Shechina rests on him. Shnemar v'hayu einacha rises baracha, right? That same pasuk above from Yeshayahu says, and your eyes will see your teacher, right? Maracha meaning Hashem. Rav Acha Bar Chanina Amar Rav Acha Bar Chanina said, ein hapargad nimol lefanav. Also, the pargad, the sort of curtain that generally conceals and separates a person from Hashem, is not locked before him. Shenamar la yikanai find maracha, and your teacher shall not hide himself anymore. Rishon Gamliel says, Bishum Rabbi Yeshua, the name of Rabbi Yeshua, Miyayim shechara beis hamikdash ein achulu. So this is a quote from the Mishnah. Rishon Gamliel had said, from the day that the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, every day has some sort of curse associated with it. And Rabbi says, Amar Rabbi sort of adds on to this and says, not only is every day cursed, but every day's curse is greater than the one before it. How do you know this? Shenamar says in Devarim, in the Psukim, which I actually read just recently in the Taichacha, but Baiker Taimar, mi-18 Arab, it says in the morning you're going to say, if only it were evening, the Arab Taimar, mi-18 Boker, in the evening you're going to say, if only it were morning. So hi Boker. So what does it mean? It's kind of unclear what the pasuk means, right? It says if only it were morning. So what morning does it mean? Maybe it means the morning of tomorrow. But if that's the case, miyada my have, right? Like, why would you wish for it to be tomorrow? You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. It must be the morning of the day before. So this pasuk is saying, since things just get progressively worse. So in the night you say, if only it were morning, things were much better then. But then already by the following morning, you're like, if only it was last night.
Just to note, of course, this is not just meant to be like a depressing, not meant just to depress us. But the reason why the Gemara is telling us this is because, first of all, it wants to motivate us to increase in light and goodness when we're in this time. And also just to let us know that anytime things look like they're in a negative state, we should be aware that means that Mashiach is closer, right? Like we're coming closer to sort of a lead up to a brighter time.
During the War of Vespasian, right? So this is the final battle of the Romans against Yerushalayim, which ultimately, was the beginning of the end, right? The destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. Gadru al ataris chasanim bahal iris. They banned the wreaths of bridegrooms, and iris is a type of instrument which we'll actually discuss in the Gemara what that was. The Puma Shel Titus Gadru al ataris kalis. In the War of Titus, which was the following. And that was Titus was the one who actually destroyed the Beis Hamikdash. They decreed that Kalas also shouldn't have a wreath on their wedding day, and that a person should not teach his son Greek. But Pomos Ha'acharon, meaning the Greek, we'll discuss whether it was Greek language or wisdom. But Pomos Ha'acharon, guys, right? In the last war, they decreed that a bride should not go out on a iparion. The English word is a palanquin, but basically it's a kind of like couch which the bride would sit on, and 4 people would carry the legs of the couch and carry her that way through the city. But the sages later permitted a bride to go out on this iparion as long as it's inside the city. Right, so now we're going to list more things that ceased as the generations progressed. For when Rabbi Meir died, those who can teach Mashalim parables ceased. When Ben Azai died, those who are diligent in Torah study ceased. Ben Zoma batlu hadarshanim. When Ben Zoma died, the honor of the Torah, those who can darshan, right, and expound the Torah ceased. We should make sure Rabbi Akiva batal kol Torah. When Rabbi Akiva died, the honor of the Torah ceased. We should make sure Rabbi ben Dosa batlu anshe ma'aseh. From Rabbi ben Dosa died, men of wondrous actions, right, perhaps of miracles, right, ceased. We know, right, because there were these amazing miracles attributed to Rabbi Mendoza. Actually, some of the only things we know about Rabbi Mendoza are the miracles that he performed. We should make Rabbi Yossi, when Rabbi Yossi died, Katanta Pasku. So we should make Rabbi Yossi Katanta Pasku Hasidim. When Rabbi Yossi Katanta died, pious people ceased. Why was he called Rabbi Yossi Katanta, right, the small one? Shahaya Katanta Shachasidim, that in his generation there was a scarcity, only a small number of pious people already. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai passed away. The glory of wisdom ceased. When Leil Hazakin died, the honor of the Torah ceased. Tara Uprecious, and purity and separation, right, from the physical world ceased. Shmuel ben Pabi Batlez of Kahuna. When Shmuel ben Pabi passed away, the glory of the Kahuna ceased. Rabbi Batal Anav of Yerichet. And finally, when Rabbi died, humility and fear of sin ceased. Okay, so some additions here will actually start the Gemara. For others, the Mishnah will continue on. But at any rate, it's either continuation of the Mishnah or a Brisa. And we're continuing the list of things that ceased. So where Pinchas ben Yair says, Yishachar Beis HaMikdash, from the time when the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, Baishu Chaverim, the Chaverim, right, which are kind of like the kind of elite of the Jewish community of Bnei Chorin, and those of noble lineage were ashamed. Chafu Rosham, and their heads were covered, right, in shame. Men of action dwindled. The Gavlu Baalei Zrara, and those of men of force prevailed. Baalei Lashon, and those who are, kind of smooth talking. The Ein Darish, Ein Mavakesh, Ein Shal. There none seek, none ask, and none inquire of matters of importance. Upon whom can we rely? Only our Father in heaven. Rabbi Elazar Gadol says, from the day that the second Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, the Chachamim, the scholars, became like scribes, which really is a name for school teachers. The Safraik Chazanaya, and the Sefer, right, the school teachers became on the level that those who would manage communal affairs. The Chazanaya, those who would manage communal affairs, Ka'ama Da'ara would be like those, like the ignoramuses. But Amma Da'ara and those the ignoramuses, Azla the Zilzala, just went and deteriorated. The Ein style, the Ein Lavakesh, there's no one asking and no one seeking. Al Mi Lanu Yishli Shine Al Abiyah Shemayim. who can rely on other than their Father in heaven? He also said, "Be'ikvos Mashiach," right in the heels of the Messianic age, chutzpah yaska, right? Chutzpah will increase. The Yeger Amir, right? And things will get very expensive. Hagefen titain piria, yain b'yoker. Even though there'll be abundant crop of grapes, the wine will still be expensive. Umachas tefat aminas. The government will turn to heresy, and no one will be able to rebuke them. The house of the sages will become a place of promiscuity. Right? The Gala will be destroyed, Gavlan will be desecrated, and the men of the border shall just go from city to city seeking tzedakah, but no one will take mercy on them. From Titzrach, the wisdom of the Seifrim, the scribes will just will spoil, right? Because no one wants to learn it. The Yerichet Yamasu, the people who are Yerushalayim will be despised. The MST and Anderis, truth will be absent. Na'aram plays the kingdom Yalbinu. Young men will embarrass their elders. Skadim Yamdu and Pekatanim. Elders will have to stand before the young people. Ben Manavel Av, a son will disgrace a father. Bas Kama Be'ima, a daughter will rise against her mother. Kala B'chamosa, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. Ayve Ish Anshe Besai, a man's greatest enemies will be his own household members. Pnei Hadar K'pnei Chelev, the face of the generation will be like a dog. Haben Eino Mispayesh Me'aviv, a son will not be afraid of his father. Mali Shanali Shine, Albino Shmaim, and finally, again, upon whom can we rely? Only our Father in heaven.
Just a few thoughts about this Mishnah. So first of all, right? So sort of, it seems a little bit out of place, that phrase, we keep repeating it. But sort of, what's the connection? We're listing a bunch of sort of negative occurrences leading up to the times of Mashiach. Why are we sort of sticking that in there? So one interpretation is actually that this is also telling us one of the negative things that are going to happen before the times of Mashiach, is that people are just going to be saying, oh, what could we do? Like, we're in this really bad place. Like, what could we do? We can only rely on HaShem. Meaning people aren't going to take responsibility for fixing things. They're just going to say, oh, we'll just, HaShem should take care of it. Sort of misplaced, reliance on HaShem. That's one idea. Also here, this idea of, the face of the generation will be like the face of a dog. What does that mean? So there's many, many different interpretations of what that means. Just a couple of them. So the Maharsha says that, dogs, right, Kelev comes from the word kulei lev, that they're all heart, right? So it says that the face of the generation will be like the face of a dog, meaning that only on the face, like only superficially will they seem to show love and care for other people, but it won't be sincere, right? There won't be true love between people. The Chavetz Chaim says that, the same with the dog, when you throw a stick and the dog chases after it, the dog doesn't try to find who threw the stick, right? They just chase after the stick, right? They're not going to take note of the fact that there's somebody behind it who threw it, right? And that's sort of symbolic of the fact that the times before Mashiach, HaShem will sort of have a stick, meaning HaShem will sort of, bring hardships to the Jewish people in order to encourage them and inspire them to do tshuva. And instead of realizing that this is coming from Hashem, people will just sort of try to fix the situation in other ways instead of realizing, wait, there's somebody behind this. Hashem is actually sending this to us to sort of teach us a lesson. And just one final thought from the Vilna Gaon, he says that when you see a dog walking, the dog will usually walk ahead of his master. So it looks like the dog is leading the way, when really the master who's walking behind it is really the leader, right? And he says that's sort of what's going to happen at the time before Mashiach, is that the leaders it will appear like they're leading, but really the leaders are going to be so scared and so, kind of looking to see if the people approve or disapprove of what they're doing, that they're not going to really be real leaders, right? It will look like they're leading, but really their masters are really the people who are their followers. So that's just a little bit about the pnei kelev, right? Being like the face of a dog. But just another idea here, like to kind of see it, like take a positive spin on all of these things, right? First of all, this idea of chutzpah, right? There being this generation being a generation of chutzpah. So, at face value, at first glance, that seems to be a negative thing, but, a lot of the, some of the commentaries here say this can also be a positive thing, right? That, for a person to have a certain confidence and not be concerned about what other people think, right? To have almost this audacity in terms of doing the right thing, that can also be an expression of chutzpah in a positive sense. And the Degel Machne Ephraim also says, in a similar vein, right, that having this chutzpah when you talk to HaShem, right, when you daven, to believe that your prayers actually matter and they actually have an impact, it almost takes a certain audacity, a certain chutzpah to be able to do that. And that's sort of a positive type of chutzpah. Also, this idea of the children embarrassing their parents, right? And again, that's of course on a simple level just means having disrespect, but in a positive way, this can mean children being able to devote themselves so wholeheartedly to Torah mitzvahs in a way that's even greater than their parents did, right? Sort of demanding a higher level or a higher standard than the generations before them. And that's sort of like a positive expression of this. And we see specifically here, it mentions the woman, right? The daughters and their mothers and the daughters-in-law, right? Their mothers-in-law. So actually in the Sotah, the Rebbe talks about how that's talking specifically about women sort of having this revolutionary, sort of creating this feminist revolution in a positive way and accomplishing things that women in previous generations were never able to do. So all of these things can sort of be seen in sort of a positive light as well. And just one more idea that one of the commentaries say is that, even if we do see these as more negative things, the Mishnah isn't telling us this just as like we said before, like just to tell us how horrible things are going to be. It's trying to tell us that, don't even though all the generations before you may have seemed to be so much more worthy of Mashiach coming, the fact that you're living in such a difficult generation, when you do devote yourself to doing the right thing, your service of HaShem is so much more valuable, right? Because you're living in a time when it's so much more difficult to be committed. That's sort of what's going to make us deserving of having Mashiach, is the fact that we're living in a more difficult time. So this is sort of meant to be like encouraging us that this is like our service of HaShem is going to mean so much more, which is why Mashiach will come in that generation.
Yeah, and I think it works in the sense that I think the association, like Jewish association with suffering, is like, oh, Mashiach's coming, right? So we have that association, like this messaging, right? Instead of feeling like, oh, giving up, like perhaps we've been forgotten, that itself is, I guess, an encouraging sign in itself.
What Rabbi Yosef here is really saying, I'll focus more on Rabbi Yosef because I guess his statement seems a little more, I guess even more bizarre, right? To be claiming to be humble, right? So what he's saying here is that Rabbi Yosef actually was truly humble, right? He really felt like he wasn't, he truly saw himself in a humble way, but people were constantly giving him honor and respect, right? So what he was saying when he was saying Ika Ana is he was saying, if all these people are showing me respect, look how humble they must be, right? Even someone like me who isn't really someone of stature, the fact that people are showing me respect shows how humble they are, right? And therefore, when he's saying Ika Ana, he's saying if there's someone like me, even someone like me who isn't anyone special, people are showing me so much respect. Look how humble all those people who are showing me respect are, and therefore there must still be humility around, right? That's really what he was trying to say. Another idea from the Yismach Maisha, he says that, humility doesn't necessarily mean that, I'm really somebody great, but because I have such great humility, I can look at myself or I can see myself as not such a great person, even though I have such great qualities. He was saying sometimes somebody can actually be someone like who actually isn't that great, right? You really have a lot of negative qualities. Like that's actually true. And you're just self-aware, right? It's not like, you're not necessarily humble in the sense of like, you're really someone great, but you play down what you have, but you actually legitimately don't have any great qualities. And you just have the self-awareness to acknowledge that. So that's sort of how Rabbi Yosef saw himself, right? He said, I'm humble, but not humble because I have anything, any special qualities to me, but I'm just aware of the fact that at least in his own eyes, he really felt that he was somebody who didn't have any special qualities to him. But what he's saying is, he's saying, still, that's still considered humility, right? Humility doesn't necessarily have to be that you're somebody really great, and despite that you have humility, but it could just, even the fact that you have the awareness, the self-awareness to acknowledge what your own faults are, that's also considered humility. Another like really interesting interpretation of this is that when he says, what he's really saying is, don't say that Rebbe had real humility, right? Because he says Rebbe, very often Rebbe would quote somebody, one of his teachers or somebody else, and then he would say but I say, right? Aymar ani, right? I say. So what the Rabbi Yosef here is saying is that you can't call Rebbe's humility a true humility, because ika ana, there is still an ana, there's still an I, right? Because the fact that he still has a sense of self, right? He's able to assert his own opinion. That shows that it's not a real complete humility. So he wasn't saying ika ana like himself. He was saying that Rebbe, right, has an ana, he has an I, and therefore you can't call it a real true humility. And then another idea from the Sfas Emes says that really what both Rabbi Yosef and Rav Nachman are saying here is, they're not saying that these qualities of humility and fear of sin are totally gone, right? They weren't saying that nobody exists. The Mishnah here isn't saying that these qualities completely cease to exist. What it's saying is that from majority of people it no longer exists, right? This has stopped becoming a common thing. But of course, there's always going to be a select few who do have it, right? So what Rav Yosef and Rav Nachman are saying is, no, that's not true. You can't say that majority of people don't have these qualities anymore, because if even out of their humility, they're saying, if even I have the quality of humility, then for sure so many other people do, right? Because I'm not anyone special, right? So what they were really trying to say is that this must be a common quality that everybody has, if we are able to have these qualities. So just a few different ways of reading this and understanding sort of this bizarre statement from Rabbi Yisrael and Rabbi Nachman. And then just one more idea. Actually, there's a beautiful sikha that talks about this, about how it sort of describes what, according to Chassidus, what true humility really is. And it says, we have to sort of stop looking at humility as this denial of what we really have, right? Humility and low self-esteem or lack of confidence are not synonymous, right? And there's a way of having a certain awareness and honesty with ourselves about what we have and like what we're able to accomplish, what we're able to do, and have a confidence in that. And at the same time, have a sense of that all those qualities that I have are a gift from HaShem, and it's something that's been given to me in order to utilize for a purpose. And it's not something that I gave to myself, right? I have these qualities. I can be aware of that, and also have a sense that this is something that's given to me for a purpose that's higher than myself and beyond myself, and I can use them as devote them to something else outside of myself. And Rav Yosef actually embodied this idea in the most powerful way. And that's actually why it says that Rabbi Yosef was called Sinai, right? Like that was his nickname, was Sinai, right? Which simply just means like, he was someone who was so knowledgeable in Torah that he was like Har Sinai itself, right? But also Har Sinai is also sort of is a symbol of this concept, right? Because Har Sinai on the one hand is a mountain, right? It's high, it has confidence, so to speak, but at the same time, it's also the lowest mountain, right? Because it's sort of this idea of this paradox of on the one hand having this confidence and this honesty and awareness of ourselves and what qualities we have to contribute, but also being able to approach them with a sense of humility and deference to where it's coming from, that's not attributed to ourselves, but attributed to HaShem. And that's where we should be devoting all of our capabilities. What's Yiras Chet, right? What's the difference between Yiras Chet and Yerushalayim, right? We have both of those terms used. Yerushalayim means, being afraid, having this awe of Hashem and being afraid of disrespecting Hashem, doing a sin that's going to show a lack of respect to Hashem. But Yiras Chet means being afraid of the sin itself, which means like I'm afraid of, even if I'm not intending to disrespect Hashem, but if even unwittingly, even without me realizing it, if I accidentally do a sin, I want to make sure I don't even do that, because I don't want my body to be a vehicle through which something happens that's against Hashem's will. And a person who has Yiras Chet is going going to do everything they can to sort of set limits and boundaries for themselves so that they don't even accidentally commit a sin. And the example of that is the Sotah, right? We start off in the very beginning of the Maseches, right? Kol araya Sotah b'kulkula, yazer after mino yayin, right? That someone sees the episode of the Sotah, they should take extra precautions, right? Like not drink any wine, right? Try to like set boundaries for themselves so they don't even accidentally do a sin, which is sort of what Yerushalayim is all about. And then this idea of anava, of humility, the one of the prime examples of that is the idea of levaya, right? The whole we said that, one of the things we learn from Egla Rufa is to escort guests, and escorting guests is sort of like a demonstration of humility and respect to the person who you're escorting. So the conclusion of this Masechta is that Rav Nachman and Rabbi Yosef are saying, right, similar to what we said from the Sfas Emetz, right? They weren't just saying about themselves, they're saying about the whole generation, that we're living in a generation where we have Yerushalayim, we have Anava, these things are not lost, right? And because we have, they're sort of, bringing, showing merit to the generation that they're living in, and therefore, Hadrin Allah Egla Rufa, we should no longer need an Egla Rufa, right? Because people already have Anava. And Salikala Maseches Sotah, we should no longer need to have the episodes of Sotah because we already have the quality of Yerushalayim, and therefore we don't need those things anymore. It's just a way of tying together.
Wow, that's so great, L'chaim.
Yes, and yes, Mazel Tov again to everyone for finishing Sotah and for joining us, and may we, on to many more.